Well, today the topic is total freedom. And what stops so many people from experiencing total freedom are usually the very same rules and regulations designed to protect them or to set them free. And the laws that seem necessary to keep society out of chaos also keep people from thinking on their own, which can in turn limit their freedom. And God originally designed man to function in an environment of total freedom. But man chose, so we might need to get that, but man chose the elusive promise of power and the lure of pale promises over paradise, over the paradise of freedom. So over the years, I've talked with thousands of people about truth and love and light and God. And most people from any religion seems to agree with those basic truths. But the one topic that seems to shut down a conversation is the topic of true and utter freedom. And countless times I've had people hold up their bony index finger and pause the conversation and say something like, "On that point of freedom, I disagree." And each time that happens, I'm flabbergasted because I think everybody wants freedom, but they don't. They don't. And so that's why it's a conversation stopper. See, people love freedom as long as it can be controlled by their church or their political group. So total freedom. And surprisingly, the thought of full-blown and unfettered freedom makes religious people of any denomination, any religion, any political group very nervous. And it should. It should. Because if you're free, you cannot and will not allow yourself to be controlled. And total freedom is the power or the right to act, to speak, or to think as one wants without hindrance or restraint. This is just from a dictionary. Total freedom is the absence of dominion by another. Just another definition. Total freedom is the state of not being imprisoned or enslaved. It's another definition. Here's a quote you might have heard. "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Thomas Jefferson penned that. See, liberty is just another word for freedom. I mean, this is what our founding fathers thought this country would be. It's just a land of just total and utter freedom. But we see what it has morphed into as the more and more we allow people to get their hooks in us, the less freedoms we have. See, it would seem that everybody would want total freedom. But surprisingly, they don't, like I said earlier. Some people are so drunk with power that they give themselves the right to control others. Some people so want to be accepted and cared for that they trade their freedom in for safety from those other people. And that's the vicious cycle. And that's what we're always fighting against. The ones who want to control and the others, and the ones who want to be controlled. And then we're caught in the middle. Quote, "America will never be destroyed from the outside. If we falter and lose our freedoms, it will be because we destroyed ourselves." Abraham Lincoln. See, it's up to each individual to incubate and handle the level of personal freedom that we feel we can maintain. All of us can to a differing degree. Freedom's never easy, but we are each and all designed to be free. That's how God set up the whole universe. He promised to supply all our need, so what's there to worry about? He promised to heal us, so what's there to worry about? He promised to have a community, so what's there to worry about? He promised all these things, that all our needs will be supplied. That's freedom. If you knew all your needs were going to be supplied forever, would you really have any worries? Yet, we're assured that the Bible says that. It says that. So where's the disconnect? It's because somewhere we've allowed someone to get their religious hooks in us or their political hooks in us. And we decide to do things their way. This next quote is from a man who believes so much in America's cause, in the ideal of ultimate total freedom, that he hopped on a ship in France, sailed all the way across the ocean, and he fought alongside the American revolutionaries, and he helped mold our nation into what once was, and hopefully will again be, the envy of the nations. And he then sailed back across the ocean after our Revolutionary War, back to France to fight in the French Revolutionary War and try to establish similar ideals. Here's his quote: "If the liberties of the American people are ever destroyed, they will fall by the hands of the clergy." That's Marquis de Lafayette. They will fall by the hands of the clergy. And see, he prophetically puts the blame of the deterioration that we see today squarely on the shoulders of the spiritual leaders of society. And I think, aren't the spiritual leaders around the globe the ones causing the most trouble around the world? Look at the Middle East. Who's causing that stuff? It's spiritual leaders. Who's not taking a stand? Here, spiritual leaders. It's pretty crazy what he saw. It had to be thoughts that were common amongst the revolutionaries, this utter freedom, and how we're supposed to be able to live our own life by our own ideals according to the basic standards of life. And Lafayette also said, humanity has won its battle. Liberty now has a country. That's how he thought of America. Humanity has won the battle finally. Now we have a place of freedom. That's what this place is supposed to be. Yet we just give it away for a little more political clout. We give it away for a little more money, whatever the cause, and we see it happening more and more and more. You see, the clergy's job in any religion is not to control the people, but it's to share the truth that sets people free. That's the only job of a religious leader, of a clergy person, male or female, any religion, is just to share the light and set people free. That's the whole design of humanity from the very first people. I met a man yesterday who inspired me. And I told him I believed true Christianity cannot and should not be controlled. Now, this is a man I'd never met before. And I told him that Christianity should not be controlled. It can't be controlled, true Christianity. But it's only designed to be released. And he said, I agree. And I was sort of shocked because usually, people don't say that kind of stuff. And he said he stopped attending a church that he loved, the one that he had been raised in, when he finally noticed the legalism they used to control the people. And I thought, well, leaving a church is never easy. Leaving the control of society for the joy of pure freedom is as scary as it is amazing. So people are out there wanting it. There's been times in this world where people turned on to the light, turned on to truth, like the first century. It went crazy. A lot of them loved what the Christ taught. And then they loved what Paul and the other boys taught, for almost 100 years. And then it went dark for a long, long time. And then really the 1960s and 70s, is when everything turned back around and the world turned back. In fact, the Middle East that's causing such trouble now embraced Christianity, embraced truth, embraced light in the early 70s, late 60s. And then 1979, they kicked them all out if you didn't think their way. So, it's sort of sad. And that's about the time things started changing. Politicians gained more control. Things started happening. It's sad to see it. See, so many churches, religions, nations, movements, civic groups cry out freedom while at the same time controlling their population that they think they're setting free. Anybody who is into controlling a group, they really think, they believe they're setting that group free. That's why you think, how could they be that way? Well, they believe it. They totally believe it. Think about Lafayette, who came from France to help the American cause. Isn't there Americans going and helping a cause that maybe I don't believe in right now? All over the world, there's young people doing stuff like that. They believe in some cause that we don't believe in. Well, there's people who didn't believe in the cause of the Americas. But it's one of great freedom, not control. It's the opposite. See, we're told that we must say things exactly the way they want us to say them, or we're considered a bad person. See this all over the news right now. You can't use certain words anymore that you could even 2 weeks ago. It's crazy. And more we're just allowing ourselves to get put in little corners and in boxes to the point where it's going to change our vocabulary, which will change our lifestyle, and we'll become more like something that we never intended to be. See, there's some people believe that everybody must believe the way that they believe. That is not freedom. Just because your church says it, just because I say it, doesn't mean it's truth. What is truth? What is light? And it's hard to decipher when we've lived a whole life and we've been trained a certain way. It's really hard to detect. See, they use politics, they use the media, they use intimidation tactics to force people to comply. And it's a sad thing to watch. Quote, "None are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free." And that's Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. And he was a German writer who was a contemporary of our American revolutionaries. And what that tells me is the whole known world, the whole Western world, basically was beginning to think the same thing: freedom. This is a German. He didn't come to our country to fight, but he talked the same way. Here's a guy you might have heard of. "Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds." Bob Marley. It's still true. You see, to think we're free and to be totally free are not always the same things. All those dogs in those yards of your neighbors, they think they're free because they have a bowl to eat out of. They could easily hop over those 6-foot fence, most of them, if they weren't so fat. You see? But the point is they don't want to. It's too easy. And that's how society becomes when we allow ourselves to be tamed in that way. Yeah. Just feeding out of somebody else's bowl. Call it whatever you want. And so to help us understand the difference between freedom and supposed freedom, let's look how society manipulates freedom through laws. And this will be interesting. We're going to get to something in a few minutes, how Jesus Christ was able to circumvent some of this mental and emotional slavery. And you'll be surprised what happened to him early on in his ministry. But see, man and woman were designed to live totally free. That's how God set it up. They were given the Spirit of God so they could communicate and connect with the Creator, the architect, the creator of all life. And this spiritual connection in its original design was to help mankind make good decisions. Therefore, you didn't have to have a written law. If you learn to walk by the Spirit, you'll never go against a good civic law. It won't happen. Read Galatians 5 and you'll see what I'm talking about. Don't have time to teach that today. It's an internal roadmap to success in any endeavor. That's how you can find all sufficiency in all things, all your needs supplied, health and prosperity. See, the Spirit of God is still around, but it's seldom used. Most Christians don't have any idea they all talk about having the Spirit of God, but they don't understand it. What's the purpose of it? Why? In fact, most of them you wouldn't know. You couldn't tell a Christian from a Jew, from a Muslim, from a Hindu, you couldn't, because if they all live by the same set of moral laws, they're all living about the same, right? So what's the advantage? That's a whole nother teaching. What's the advantage to being a Christian? There has to be something. What's the advantage to having the Spirit of God if you don't like the term Christian? See, the Spirit of God's still around. See, the freedom that emanates from the Spirit of God will never be at cross purposes with good and right civic laws. It won't. You see? And after that Spirit of God was sidelined by a couple of people, way back in the day, a few thousand years ago, some people had an understanding of the story of redemption of mankind from the stars, and a lot of churches have taught that that's how people knew the Word, before the law of Moses. And I thought, well, if that's true, how come it's not written in any of the early civic laws? It's not. It's not existent. And so as widespread as we might imagine, it was not widespread. And next came something that is called the Noahide laws. And it was a set of 7 laws, sort of a Judean tradition. And 6 were given to Adam and Eve, and the 7th to Noah after the flood, to help keep things from ever going back that way again. And you can study that, but there's nothing in those that aren't just normal, common sense human things. And then there was a set of laws discovered in a tablet form that were from about 2050 BC. And they were called the Code of Ur-Nammu. And this was written in cuneiform script while Noah and his sons were still alive. Which means probably a relative. If they were in truth the only people left. And so put that one in your pipe. And these writers were not so distant grandchildren of Noah. And they would have all heard of Noah and Shem, who were the great spiritual leaders of that day. But they chose civil law over spiritual insight. And the most complete set of early laws was called the Code of Hammurabi. And this was written about 1772 BC. And it was about 300 years before the law of Moses. In fact, it is mentioned repeatedly in the law of Moses, the Code of Hammurabi. And it contains 282 laws that were graded on a curve. And so, according to your social status, if you're a rich person, you got treated one way. If you were a poor person, you got treated another way. If you were a slave, you got treated even worse by these laws. Sounds like our government officials, right? They think they're above the law, and us lowly citizens, are in need of constant control. And we need to give them our money, too. Isn't that what people fought against in the early Americas? I mean, they didn't want the control. They didn't want to give all their money. Yet we just keep giving it up, giving it up. The Code of Hammurabi is where the term an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth comes from. You ever heard that? And, I poke your eye out, my eye gets poked out. I murder you, I'm going to die. It's called matching or mirrored punishment, or in Latin, it's lex talionis, and that means the law of retaliation. And that's how people lived. That was the Code of Hammurabi, and that was that first code too, that was written at the same time as Noah and his kids were recovering after the flood. So pretty crazy stuff. And then the mafia, don't they use a similar code? Hey, yous mess with my family, and I mess with you's family. Capiche? Capiche? Or here's one you've all heard of lately, the Sharia law. That's an offshoot of the ancient Code of Hammurabi. The law of retaliation. And it's designed to control and conform humanity. And it's interesting to note that the word Sharia means the way. Isn't that funny? Didn't Jesus call himself the way, the truth, and the life? And see, Christ came to set people free. Muhammad came to put people in bondage and to control them. And that was 600 years after the death of Christ, when this garbage was put out there. So it's all about control. They throw a little freedom and light and love in there, but it's all about control. Look what's happening around the world. If you don't think my way, you die. And here's something that teed me off when I saw it. In 2007, something called a Sharia Index was launched on the Tokyo Stock Exchange. And this index includes companies that comply with Sharia law. And the companies included in this index are screened on a daily basis, and they exclude non-Sharia compliant companies. This is a Tokyo Stock Exchange. What people will put up with to make money. What companies will put up with to make money. What companies will make their people put up with to make money. And if it's on the Tokyo Stock Exchange, it's other places, folks. That was 2007, before you ever heard that word. See, the Romans adapted these harsh laws to help them dominate the known world. And their laws, called the 12 Tables, were so effective that they guided the Romans to incredible wealth and prosperity for almost 1,000 years. It's a pretty good set of laws that'll last 1,000 years. Ours are just over 200. Doing pretty good, but they keep giving them away and weakening them and adapting them. And here's a few examples of this, the 12 tables. An unpaid debt ends in slavery or death. A dreadfully deformed child will be put to death. If a person sang a song that slandered another, he shall be clubbed to death. Eat that, Taylor Swift. If a businessman defrauded his client, he will be killed. A false witness will be thrown off a high cliff to his death. If a judge receives a bribe, he will receive capital punishment, death. Putting to death someone who has not been convicted is forbidden and will end up in your death. See, pretty much you break the law, you die. That's how the Romans ruled. When Paul was in prison in Rome, the possible outcome of survival was very minuscule. The Romans killed almost all their prisoners. He knew this. See, prison to the Romans was not a correctional facility. You didn't go there to get corrected. You went there to get tried and put to death. That was pretty much it. Or you got sold into slavery. You got put into Roman slavery and then put to death. So pretty much you break the law, you die. Even my home state of Texas isn't that bad. It's bad, but not quite that bad. See, the Judean law, the law of Moses, had similarities with the Code of Hammurabi and some differences. And in many ways, the law of Moses was even more restrictive than the Code of Hammurabi, because the laws of Moses not only controlled civil behavior, but it controlled your diet. It controlled the clothes you wear. It controlled your haircut, and if you could have a beard or if you should have a beard or not. It controlled your entire belief system. And that's what God had to do because people rejected the Spirit of God. Sort of crazy. And so the Spirit of God was eclipsed by a law that was designed to help people understand that Spirit of God and get back a piece of paradise. So that's what we're battling against, folks. So now we're going to unravel the code. And see, this Code of Hammurabi had been followed in the Middle East for so long, it was even mentioned and later unraveled by Jesus Christ. This is 1,800 years later. And so Matthew, if you want to turn there, Matthew 5, we're going to read 38 through 41. This is going to be from King James. And we're going to start in 38, Matthew 5. Ye have heard that it hath been said, Jesus Christ said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Everybody heard that. See, this Hammurabi statement is included in the law of Moses, in Leviticus 21:24, Leviticus 24:20, and Deuteronomy 12:19. Now, watch how Jesus shows us how to upgrade our thinking from this archaic law. And watch the progression upward from physical abuse to seeing into and with the mind of God. That's what the Spirit of God allows us, to actually see other people through the filter of God. God. Verse 39, but I say unto you, that ye resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if any man will sue thee at law, and take away thy coat, let him have your cloak too, your jacket. And whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain or two. See, when asked about revenge, Mahatma Gandhi is said to have said, an eye for an eye only ends up making the whole world blind. 50 or so years later, Martin Luther King Jr. adapted Gandhi's quote and said, the old law of an eye for an eye leaves everyone blind. It's funny how these quotes from over 3,000 years ago, almost 4,000 years ago, are still being used. See, Jesus hits the reset button and he's going to reboot this conversation to a higher level than any prior laws. This is a spiritual law. This is an upgrade. This is our design to live with this kind of love. 44, but I say unto you, love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. Now, folks, is that easy to do? No! That means love isn't easy. That ye may, and this is the purpose, here's the benefit, that ye may be, or you might act like the children of your Father which is in heaven, for he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. See, it went from getting slapped to getting sued, to being forced to do something you don't want to do, to loving your friends, to loving your enemies, and finally, to loving others like God loves them. And this is the end result of the law of love. This is true freedom. Freedom to love others like God loves them. That's the whole point of humanity, is love. It's the whole point. See, did you catch that God even loves the unjust, the bad guys? That's craziness. That's so hard to do. If you've really been burned by somebody or a group or a country, a political party, whatever you think, you fill in the blank. I mean, this is big time love, big love, and freedom is that big. Love is that big. Verse 46, if ye love them which love you, what reward have you? Do not even the publicans the same? Remember the publicans were the tax collectors? They were the low-life, yellow-bellied, sap-sucking, hated, filthy, thieving, Roman-loving, traitorous tax collectors. He said they even love each other. Hey, friend. And he said, and if you salute your brethren only, what do ye more than others? And again, he goes, don't even the publicans so? Don't even those filthy tax collectors? They have friends too. Be ye therefore perfect. And this is that beautiful Greek word teleos. And it means to be fully complete, or a full adult human, to be a complete human. Be therefore complete, perfect, totally there, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect, teleos. So here Jesus Christ is saying, be like God. So if you just love people who love you, everybody does that. If you just salute, say hi to people who are your friends, everybody, even the worst of people do that. It's pretty wild. If we want to be perfect, mature, or complete, we have to be able to understand the spiritual side of life. And we can live above the civil laws as we learn to live with love. Love is freedom. Now, come on up. We're gonna do a little epic scene here. Done this before from Easy Rider. It's a little freedom scene. Mike, if you could read the yellow stuff. And to set this up, there's two characters. There's George Hansen, and he was played by Jack Nicholson, and that's who he's going to play. And he was a heavy drinking attorney. And he was always a passenger on the back of a motorcycle. He wore a football helmet. And then Billy, the second character, is played by Dennis Hopper, who was the sidekick to Easy Rider. And to set the scene, they wanted to get a motel room. This is like 1969, 1970. They're riding on their Harleys. They thunder up to this little one-level motel room, and then as soon as they get up near the front, the no vacancy light flickers on. And see, they didn't want these long-haired Harley-riding guys in their motel. So, go ahead, with emphasis.
You know, this used to be a hell of a good country. I can't understand what's gone wrong with it.
Man, everybody's got chicken. That's what happened. Hey, we can't even get into like a second-rate hotel. I mean, a second-rate hotel, dig? You know, they think we're going to cut their throat or something. They're scared, man.
They're not scared of you. They're scared of what you represent to them.
Hey, man, all we represent to them, man, is somebody who needs a haircut.
Oh, no, what you represent to them is freedom.
What the hell's wrong with freedom? What's it all about?
Of course, they don't ever tell anybody that they're not free because they're, huh?
Start here.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's right. That's what it's all about, all right. But talking about it and being it, that's two different things. I mean, it's real hard to be free when you are bought and sold in the marketplace. Of course, don't ever tell anybody that they're not free, because then they're going to get real busy killing and maiming to prove to you that they are. Oh, yeah, they're going to talk to you and talk to you and talk to you about individual freedom. But you see a free individual, it's going to scare them.
Well, it don't make them running scared.
No, it makes them dangerous.
Give him a round of applause. He deserves a Plastic Academy Award there. It don't make them running scared. It makes them dangerous. When people see a truly free individual, it scares the pee willy out of them. It makes them uncomfortable. Because, you know why? Because they can't control you. They can't control you. A truly free individual will scare people. What do you think people were so scared of Jesus Christ for? Or anybody who walked with the Spirit? They're afraid of freedom. People are afraid of freedom. And that's what this whole country is designed on. And that's what that's what the chassis of humanity is freedom, which is love. Quote, "It is difficult to free fools from the chains they revere." That's Voltaire. It's difficult to free people from the chains that they revere. People revere their chains. They love their chains. They love their bondage. They're comfortable with their bondage. Stop it! Stop it! Quote, "Freedom is not worth having if it does not connote freedom to err." Again, that's Mahatma Gandhi. You're going to make mistakes. You got to give people the freedom to make mistakes, to err. See, so misunderstood freedom. See, the good people of the world will never understand your freedom in Christ. Even some of the most trusted people in your life are going to try to stop you. Even people in your family at times will try to stop you. It's crazy, but it happens. When I was 17 and first turned on to Christianity, I was just beginning to see and understand and talk about the Word of God, and I started seeing the power that a Christian was supposed to have. Yet I couldn't find anybody who was living that way in any of the churches that I was attending. And I talked to my grandmother once, who thought she was the expert on all religious things, and she said, she held up that bony index finger and she goes, "Mark, you take what Jesus said and you fling it." Her dad had been a preacher and she hated him for it. It's pretty wild. But see, even Jesus' family thought he was a nut job. Isn't that hard to believe? But they never did until he started walking with power. Do you know Jesus, for 30 years, he lived perfectly? And in those first 30 years, how many miracles did he do? None. It seems to me if you're perfect, you should live a miraculous life. He didn't do one single miracle in those first 30 years because he just lived by the ethics of the law. That's why we see so few out here today. But the moment he got that Spirit of God and learned how to operate it, learned how to utilize it, learned how to understand what would deceive him and trip him up from that, his life changed. He started doing signs, miracles, and wonders. People were getting healed. People were getting delivered. People were following him in droves. He looked different. He acted different. Yet every Christian says, I have Christ in me. Act like it. Let me see it. Do something. Show it. See, his family liked him the way that he was. They liked perfect little Jesus. They loved him that way. He just did exactly what the law said, and he was able to live perfectly. Because it was set up so you could live perfect, but not powerful. And this record tells of Jesus who had recently received Holy Spirit. This is just weeks after. And watch what happens. See, I mean, he came out of the wilderness after all those 40 days and nights where he was tempted in the wilderness, and even by the devil himself. And he came out of that victorious, but he was in shape, baby. I mean, if you didn't eat for 40 days, you're a lean fighting machine, you see. And God still took care of him somehow. He was even harassed by wild animals. You can find that in one of the chapters. I mean, just incredible stuff he had to deal with, but it helped him be the person he was going to be. It helped him remain the Christ. And we're going to see how he took on the devil, deflected many temptation. He had just chosen his 12 apostles, and he was starting to heal people and do crazy, amazing things. He was making waves, and people were talking. They were talking. If he was around today doing that stuff, he'd be considered a nut job, a charlatan. But people were ready for it then. Are we ready for it now? Are we really ready for signs, miracles, and wonders? The more people we get ready, the more we're going to begin to see this stuff happen. Mark 3:21. I'm going to read this from another, first this is King James first. 3:21. And when his friends heard of it, they went out to lay hold of him, for they said, he is beside himself. It says his friends. It's said better in the Amplified. You can read the Amplified. It's fun to read in the voice and in the message too. But here we go. I'll just use the Amplified. We're going to read 20 through 22. Then he went to a house, probably Peter's, so he had to be up in Galilee. But a throng came together again. That means a whole bunch of people, so that Jesus and his disciples could not even take food. There were so many people surrounding them, he couldn't even eat. And when those who belonged to him, his kinsmen, heard it, they went out to take him by force, for they kept saying, he is out of his mind, beside himself, deranged. They said, this guy is flat out crazy. He's nuts. Jesus is possessed. The kinsmen were his family, if you read verse 31. His mother and his brothers. Now, who could have had more clear revelation than Mary 30 years prior? But what happens to a soul over time? You think there was political pressure? You think there was social pressure and religious pressure to get her to stop thinking the way that she was thinking about her son? Oh, yeah. He was different now. He was very, very, very different. In fact, no one had ever seen anything like him. They never saw anything that looked as good as him, or that moved as good as him, or that loved as good as him. They'd never seen it. They never saw anybody as free as him. And what does freedom do to religious people? Scares them. And then they want to do what to it? Control it, kill it, whatever. And so they're on a mission to nab Jesus. This was a familial snatch squad of double agents, and they had their black Suburban with dark tinted windows. And they pulled up to this house, Peter's house probably. And his mother was in there. She had those big sunglasses, and she was looking out over the top of them. She cracked the window a little bit, signaled the boys, go get them. And so they had their little skinny little ties on and their black suits and their little ear things on. And, and they're going, okay, Mom, we're on the way. And so they go in, and here's what Jesus, well, it's pretty wild, but now Mary changed, of course. I don't want to make her look horrible, but at this point, early in his ministry, she got talked into thinking poorly about her own son. Imagine thinking your own son is a nut job, is possessed. I'm talking about somebody who's only doing good. So she and his brothers, probably James and Jude, who wrote James and Jude, they were deceived at this point. In verse 22, and here's what his friends and family were hearing. And the scribes, that's the lawyers, who came down from Jerusalem. They came from Jerusalem. These are the top dogs. They came down early in the ministry because they wanted to stop it before it started growing. And they walked 70 miles to Galilee. And they came down from Jerusalem and said, "He is possessed by Beelzebub, and by the help of the prince of demons, he is casting out demons." He's casting out spirits because he's even more possessed by the prince of the devils himself. Jesus is possessed with the devil himself. And that was said enough. They kept saying this stuff. And so it eventually, Mary starts questioning herself, what have I done here? Could these things be being done by somebody possessed? Is my son that I raised to be the Christ really just possessed? The temple thought that this Jesus guy was important enough to spread disinformation, and so they sent these lawyers from Jerusalem. And maybe this has happened to you when you disagreed with somebody, or when you left or changed within a certain church or denomination or ministry. When you start shining a little bit too much, what do they want to do? Their words caused Jesus' mom, Mary, and his brothers to think he was crazy. They believed those words, or they never would have acted. They liked the old Jesus, the one with no spiritual power, but he was different now. Screwed into place. Hammered down. You start living a little too free, and people are going to want to knock you back down to the place you were before. Sort of like that nail that pops up on your deck. You go in the garage, you open the drawer, you get out your hammer, and you go out, bam, bam, bam. And you pound that nail back in, or you screw it back in if it's a screw, because you don't want that thing sticking up. Well, that's how we are with the Spirit of God. We stand out. We make a difference. See, man's sorely lacking without the true appreciation or application of the Holy Spirit. And now you can live pretty good. In fact, you could actually live perfectly on this earth without the Spirit of God. but you'll never walk powerfully. See, we can live far above the law. See, the Spirit of God is so powerful that if we learn to faithfully operate it, we will no longer need the law of Moses. And this is what they saw back then. And for us, with the Spirit of God, we can live far above any civic law, religious law, nationalistic law. It doesn't matter. You will never do that stuff. See, what stops many people from experiencing total freedom are the same rules and regulations that are designed to protect them. The laws that are necessary to keep society out of chaos can also keep people from thinking on their own, which in turn limits one's freedom. See, God originally designed man and woman to function in an environment of total freedom. But man, the first man and woman, and people through the years, they've chose the elusive promise of power and the lure of promised things over the paradise of freedom. So let's regain our freedom with a renewed interest in the Spirit of God that's been placed within each of us. And we're going to live above any and all laws. And then we're going to walk with true freedom, and we're going to live a lifestyle that most people only read about. God bless.